Edward James Zakrzewski II spent exactly 29 years on death row after being convicted for the murder of his wife and their 2 young children. He was executed on July 31, 2025, at Florida State Prison by lethal injection. Throughout that time, his case remained one of the most chilling in the state's criminal history. But what happened inside that family home in Mary Esther is still hard to comprehend. To understand how it all came to be, we must go back to his origin. This documentary contains factual descriptions that may be sensitive to some viewers. It is presented with care, respect, and the intention to inform. Edward James Zakrzewski II was born on January 31, 1965 in Kalamazoo, Michigan. He grew up in an environment about which little is known, but his college attendance was brief before deciding to enlist in the United States Air Force, seeking a structured career with future prospects. He was initially stationed at a base in Montana, although other reports suggest it may have been Idaho. It was at one of these bases where he met Sylvia, a South Korean waitress working to support herself after ending a previous marriage to another American serviceman. Sylvia's family living in South Korea had strongly disapproved of that previous relationship. Even when she traveled with her then-husband to visit them, the rejection was evident, influencing her decision to divorce. Edward, on the other hand, made a completely different impression. After starting a relationship, he and Sylvia married around 1986. In 1987, their first child was born, Edward James Zakrzewski III, nicknamed Kim. In 1989, Zakrzewski was stationed at a base in South Korea. Sylvia, who never hid how much she missed her homeland, received the news with joy. For her, it was a chance to return home. While in Korea, their second child was born, a daughter named Anna. Sylvia's family welcomed Edward warmly, a stark contrast to her ex-husband. Everything seemed to be going well. But in 1992, things changed. Zakrzewski was reassigned to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. The family settled in Mary Esther, a small town in Okaloosa County. That's when the relationship began to unravel. Sylvia felt miserable, deeply nostalgic, and isolated. The cultural difference, racism, and the rejection she faced as the mother of biracial children affected her seriously. She repeatedly expressed her desire to return to South Korea, this time with her children. The marriage deteriorated rapidly. Neighbors would later testify that Edward had seriously stated that if Sylvia ever tried to leave him, he would kill her and the children. No one reported this to the authorities. June 9, 1994 was a day that would forever change this family's history. Edward was at work on base when he received a phone call. His son, Kim, only 7 years old, was the one who spoke to him. He said his mother planned to divorce him and take both children back to South Korea. Some reports suggest Sylvia instructed her son to deliver that message. During his lunch break, Edward went to the base exchange store and purchased a machete. There didn't seem to be an immediate reason, but all signs point to a decision already being made. Later, he went to a bar and met with a veteran friend. During their conversation, Zakrzewski made a disturbing remark. He said he wondered what it would be like to kill someone. He returned home in the afternoon. Sylvia and the children weren't there yet. Edward hid the machete, a crowbar, and a rope in the bathroom. He meticulously prepared the space where he would commit the crime. When his wife and children returned, he waited in the bedroom with the crowbar. Sylvia didn't go in, so he went to look for her. He found her on the couch, eyes closed, resting. He attacked her from behind with the crowbar, hitting her so hard she lost consciousness. He dragged her to the bedroom and continued beating her. Then he strangled her with a rope. Not satisfied, he would later mutilate her body with the machete to ensure she was dead. He then went to the bathroom and called his son Kim, asking him to brush his teeth. The boy obeyed, unaware. While he brushed, Edward attacked him with the machete, striking his head, neck, and back. Kim died from the injuries. Edward placed his body in the bathtub. He then called Anna, 5 years old, under the same pretense. He repeated the same brutal act and placed her body in the tub on top of her brother's. Finally, he dragged Sylvia's body and laid it over the children. 3 blood-soaked bodies stacked in the same bathroom where just minutes earlier, the kids had brushed their teeth. After the murders, Zakrzewski showered, changed clothes, and went back to a bar where he drank until he was heavily intoxicated. He fell asleep in his car, parked just outside. A patrolling police unit found him. They woke him, confirmed his drunken state, and confiscated his car keys, instructing him to pick them up later when sober. Hours later, at dawn, he returned to the house. Without keys, he broke a window to enter. He changed into his military uniform, took Sylvia's car, and drove to the bar where his own car remained parked. Using a spare key, he retrieved his vehicle and went to a bank, withdrawing $5,000 in cash. He then flew from Orlando to Hawaii. In Hawaii, he adopted the name Michael Green. He met a pastor and his wife who ran a religious commune. He told them he was a man seeking redemption and peace. They allowed him to stay in a shack on their property in exchange for maintenance work. No one suspected a thing. On Monday, June 13, 1994, concerned about his unauthorized absence, military personnel from Eglin Base visited his home. The sheriff was also called. Upon arrival, they saw the broken window and entered. What they found left them stunned. In the bathroom, the lifeless bodies of Sylvia, Kim, and Anna stacked in the bathtub. That same day, the country was rocked by another headline. The bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman had been found in Los Angeles. The O.J. Simpson case dominated media attention. Meanwhile, the triple murder in Florida went largely unnoticed. Zakrzewski became the subject of a nationwide manhunt. No one suspected he was in Hawaii, where he had no known connections. 4 months later, on October 14, 1994, his case was featured on the TV show Unsolved Mysteries, which included his photos and a public alert. The pastor who housed him watched the show while Zakrzewski was in the room. He commented aloud that the man on TV looked a lot like him. Zakrzewski nervously laughed and said, "Yeah, he looks like me, but that's not me." The pastor and his wife decided to speak with him the next morning, but by October 15th, Zakrzewski was gone. Instead of fleeing again, he voluntarily walked into a police station in Hawaii. Perhaps he realized it was only a matter of time before he was caught. He was extradited to Florida on October 25th. In August 1995, while awaiting trial, he attempted to escape with another inmate. They were caught trying to climb the prison fence. On March 19, 1996, Zakrzewski pleaded guilty to all 3 murders. During the sentencing phase, his attorney Elton Killam pleaded for leniency. He argued that his client had acted under severe psychological pressure.
The motivation was that he perceived everything as so hopeless about his wife having happiness or his children having happiness that he decided to end their misery by taking their lives.
According to the defense, Sylvia had emotionally abused him, been unfaithful, had a gambling addiction, and constantly threatened to take the children away. They claimed Edward feared his children would grow up discriminated against in South Korea for being biracial. His thinking, they said, was deeply distorted, and he believed he was acting out of compassion. The prosecution, led by Bobby Elmore, dismantled that narrative. He argued that the crimes were premeditated, brutal, and emotionally devastating. Elmore focused especially on Anna's death, a 5-year-old girl likely killed last, and who may have witnessed her brother's murder. He insisted there was no mercy, only calculated violence. The jury recommended the death penalty for the murders of Sylvia and Kim, with 7,005 votes. For Anna's murder, the result was 6,006, which translated to a life sentence. But Judge G. Robert Barron overruled that recommendation. He determined that Anna endured unimaginable terror before her death and imposed the death penalty in her case as well. In his words, "This court cannot imagine a more heinous or inhumane way to die." On April 19, 1996, Zakrzewski was sentenced to death for all 3 murders. Over the next 29 years, he filed multiple appeals. All were denied by the Florida Supreme Court in 1998, 2003, and 2018, by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1999, and by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in 2006 and 2009. In 2017, he requested a review of his sentence under a new law requiring unanimous jury verdicts to impose the death penalty. but the court rejected the request, stating the legal change was not retroactive. In 2023, that law was repealed. On July 1st, 2025, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed the death warrant for Edward Zakrzewski. On July 31st, 2025, Edward James Zakrzewski spent his final day after 29 years on death row. The day began before sunrise. He woke up around 5 o'clock a.m. and quietly prepared for what was coming. Though he was offered a final meeting with a spiritual advisor, Zakrzewski declined. For his last meal, he made a detailed request: fried pork chops, potatoes, bacon, fried onions, toast, root beer, a slice of pie, a scoop of ice cream, and a cup of coffee. Everything was served as requested. Later that afternoon, he was led into the execution chamber at Florida State Prison and strapped onto the gurney. A white sheet was placed over him and the final preparations were made. At exactly 6 o'clock p.m., the curtain to the witness room was raised. 14 witnesses were present, including reporters and prison officials. When the warden asked if he had any final words, Zakrzewski responded without hesitation. With a tone mixing irony and resignation, he said, "I want to thank the good people of the Sunshine State for killing me in the most cold and calculated, clean, humane, and efficient way possible. I have no complaints whatsoever." Then in a calm voice, he began reciting Robert Frost's poem Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. However, he did not finish. His voice faded halfway through the verse. At 6:04 p.m., the lethal drugs began to flow. Zakrzewski gasped a few times, his chest rising and falling in sharp jolts. Within moments, his breathing slowed and ceased. By 6:12 p.m., he was still. 1 minute later, at 6:13 p.m., he was officially pronounced dead. He was 60 years old. After nearly 3 decades of appeals, confinement, and silence, a dark and disturbing chapter in Florida's criminal history came to a close.